Welcome back to Let's Play Every Day. Tim McNeff, along with Heather Rule and Tanishka Mhaskar. We lost Alexis Pearson. We thought we had her, but the Bar Down Beauties had a little change in scheduling, so she is otherwise occupied. Happy to have you ladies with me here today. We've got a couple other stories here we can talk about, spending as much or as little time on these as you guys want to. You tell me. As I did my rundown, because it's the latest, sort of live action with the local angle. The Lynx played again last night, lost again last night. They're now 1-5. They played to the Las Vegas Aces, who are 5-1. So it's a difficult game. What I thought was interesting out of that, according to the Minneapolis Star Tribune, was Aerial Powers, who'd been in a shooting slump, somehow was able to get Michael Jordan's digits. Kind of nice to be able to reach out to somebody like that, right?
Yeah, that was interesting when I read that. It's like, oh, you just call up Michael Jordan. That's cool.
Yeah. And his advice was let the game come to her, and she did. And she scored 25 points. But ironic that in the night that she finally does score, the rest of the team really struggled. And apparently, if you believe Cheryl Reeve, it was officiating. I didn't watch the game. Did either of you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So they're now 1-5. I guess I'll ask this question. I asked last week, and they're 0-4. Second year in a row, they've started 0-4. Now 1-5. Cheryl Reeve had a plan. She brought in some veteran players and had a design for that team. Two of them are gone, and one of them isn't seeing any time on the floor. Is this team capable of bouncing back again like it did last year, or has Minnesota-itis finally caught up with Cheryl Reeve and the Minnesota Lynx?
I mean, I think it's a long season, so they definitely are capable of bouncing back. And the bad start isn't ideal, but they've done it before, and Reeves has had her team bounce back before, so it's definitely possible. But I feel like a lot has to change for that to happen, because it just seems like I don't really watch these games that much, but it just seems like most of the team, like it's just the entire team just not playing as well as they could be.
I think it would be hard to bet against Cheryl Reeve. I think just what she's done and the type of coach she is and the success that she's had here. So I think, hopefully they're adjusting to, like you said, she had a plan, coming in, but it sounds like part of that plan's already blown up a bit. So hopefully she's able to adjust and they're able to kind of go forward. It was, even just reading the story, and not seeing the game, so not really being able to say about the officiating, that is a little concerning, I guess, that was kind of the focus. If that was why, like, I never like to point fingers at officiating for why you lose a game. I mean, there's so much else that goes into it. So having not seen it, I'm not, not really sure what happened there, but that's hopefully coming out of a place of frustration, maybe. Officiating in basketball is just so, it is such a big part of the game. I think bigger than in other sports a lot of times. And, hopefully they could take some positives away from last night and the good game from Powers.
So Sylvia Fowles, this was supposed to be her farewell tour, and Reeve was building this team around her to win a championship for her on her way out. It was sort of a one-time run. We traded at draft day and accumulated picks for next year's draft when she knows she has to rebuild anyway. At what point do you have to consider trading Sylvia Fowles to a title contender if you're not, and accumulating those picks to set yourself up next year for a draft when you know for sure you're going to have the current two-time defensive player of the year and last year's player of the year, and the likely addition of a Minnesota hometown player who you know is going to pack the stands if you get a chance to get her. So do you send Fowles to a place where she has a better chance to win a championship and build for next year? And if so, at what point?
I mean, I think right now it's just too early to say that, because it has only been 6 games. But if they don't start bouncing back and just winning more and just playing better basketball like they had in years past, then you do have to think about it. It's just, I think the point, like if it just doesn't get better than this, if this just becomes a continuous pattern, not because slow starts happen all the time, and if you can bounce back from the slow start, then you actually are a good team. But if you can't, then it's probably time to start looking toward the draft and toward the future.
So the Twins are in action tonight. They're going to play their next 15 games against Detroit and Kansas City, starting with the Kansas City team that does not have noted Twins killer Salvador Perez in the lineup tonight. It's May. How important is this stretch for the Twins? Because you're playing two teams that are sub 500 teams that are not good. You're up by 3 games in your division, and this would seem to me a real opportunity to pad your win-loss column. Am I putting too much on it too early in the season?
I mean, a little bit. I don't know. But then I said a couple weeks ago too, like every game's important. And so like the game where they didn't pitch hit Byron Buxton, that was like, okay, well, there's a winnable game right there. So I think to this point, they've shown that they can play well against, the teams they should be beating. Even, they're done with the A's now. They've played their season series against them, but even against the A's here when they swept them, like they didn't play that well. They weren't hitting that well. It was just that the A's were so much worse. So, but they were still able to win those games. And so I think, should they go into Kansas City and win and, beat up on the White Sox have, kind of run into all kinds of issues this year a little bit. And I think there's definitely a good opportunity, again, to keep winning series, I think is the goal. It'll be interesting to see. I know Trevor Larnach went out for a rehab assignment. I think they're hoping they can call him up in Kansas City. I know that they're starting against a left-handed pitcher for the Royals tonight. So I would expect probably they'll put Jose Miranda in at first base just because they never like to start Luis Ariz against a lefty. I don't really understand that because he's their most consistent hitter. So because I think that's what everyone's thinking is that'll be the move for Larnach is sending Jose Miranda down since Jose Miranda is still with the team, since they didn't send him down earlier this week like some people thought. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully they can keep up the hitting. I think it was good to see Correa back the other day. 14 runs, 14 hits. That was kind of a blowout game that, it was good to see kind of everybody hitting, but those games are sort of outliers a little bit, because they don't happen all the time and everyone's kind of hitting. And so hopefully Correa can keep up his hitting. And he was finally, like the week before he got hit by that pitch, he was finally figuring it out, or not figuring it out. That's probably not the way to word it, but he had finally kind of started
Warmed
hitting and had his hitting streak. That was because he had a slow start to the year. So hopefully that can continue. And I think you're right. I mean, these are definitely winnable series coming up. They have Detroit coming in here, the next homestand too. And they're, I thought they were going to take a step forward this year. It doesn't seem like that's happening in Detroit. So.
And they may figure it out at some point. So get them while they're stumbling. You mentioned about Miranda staying around. The guy they sent down was Royce Lewis. How did he do last night, you guys? Let's see. 3 for 3 with the home run and a stolen base. And the Saints lost their 10th game in a row. So what's he going to learn down at AAA, Tanishka?
I don't think that there is much. I don't really understand why he was sent down, but I just saw a lot of outrage on it. Like, as someone who doesn't follow baseball that much, I just saw a bunch of outrage on that, so that was interesting.
It's been a week. It has been a week. With the Royce Lewis thing, the Buxton thing. I think I personally would understand the move a lot more if Miranda wasn't up here on the bench hitting 94 or whatever he's hitting. I think everyone thought that was going to be the move. It made sense from the shortstop for a shortstop perspective, but then they also said they were going to have Royce Lewis play different positions down in AAA too, which kind of threw some people for a loop as well. So
you could do that up here.
Yeah, exactly. You could do that up
Right.
here, or I know you want him playing in the field, but have him DH.
please.
It's not really talked about a lot, but they don't have a DH. A lot of times what they do is they have Jeffers and Sanchez, your only two catchers up here, switching. They'll be in the lineup as catcher and DH, kind of flip-flop, which almost bit him the other day because Jeffers got nailed with a foul ball in the throat, and I thought he was going to have to come out of the game, and then Sanchez would have had to catch, and you lose your DH, that whole thing. So, and they're both, Sanchez is heating up lately, but they're both, I think Jeffers is around 200 average. Sanchez is sort of feast or famine a little bit at the plate. So that's always been interesting to me that they've gone that route with their DH. So I would have stuck Lewis there. Again, I know you want him in the field for sure, but I think I think that's what threw people is he did so well up here. And but maybe, that was the plan all along. I think the other thing, when they called Lewis up, I think they thought Correa was going to be out for much longer. They thought he had a broken bone. So it was kind of an interesting call up from the start because they were probably thinking, oh, he'll be up here for a while. Then it turned out, well, actually, no. So,
which is good news.
Yeah.
But in the sense that he was back, Correa's back earlier. But none of this makes any sense to me. None of it. And you could DH Buxton. If you don't want to put him in the field where he hurts himself, you can DH Byron more. Maybe a few less scheduled days off and a few more times at DH would help the team. But none of it makes sense to me. So yesterday, there's a headline in the Star Tribune. One of the sub-headlines was Minnesota Wild next season. Who stays, who goes? And I'm like, ooh. And I went there, and Sarah McClellan did an extensive piece on there and all sorts of players, but really didn't go there with the who stays and who goes. So I want you guys to put on your Minnesota Wild GM hats. And what I did was I took over Sarah's work minus, knowing that they've got a lot of key decisions to make. I didn't think it was worth our time to talk about, and you can stop me, any of these guys, Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Hartman, Boldy, Spurgeon, Erickson Ek, Greenway, Foligno, and Brodin. All of those guys are signed at least through next year. And the only ones I could see potentially being traded out of that group would be Hartman, Foligno, and maybe Greenway or Zuccarello, but I doubt it. I mean, all those are unlikely, but potential. So running alphabetical order, what I want from you guys is just sort of based on what you saw, based on what you know to this point, and what you would do with this team going forward to try to get under that salary cap. Are these guys contributing members of the team next year? And we'll start with Callan Addison, a defenseman, 22 years old. And Sarah's synopsis: called up from the minors and the Wild's blue line was shorthanded because of injury. Expected to compete for a spot on the roster, but was notably MIA down the stretch, did not play at all in the stretch run, was not called up during the playoffs when the Wild's defense, let's just say, was less than stellar. So, Tanishka, what do you think? Callan Addison with the team this fall?
I hope so. In the exit interviews earlier this week, Phil Guerin was talking about how Addison has a chance to make the roster and if he can take someone's job. But I don't really fully still understand why he didn't get much playing time in the postseason, especially with Dumba. All the stuff that came out about him with the broken ribs, just like everything he was going through, having trouble breathing. He was definitely less than 50%. And you could see that on the ice. So I don't know why they just never went with a healthier player who might have given us more impact. So I'd hope that throughout training camp and the preseason next season, he does take someone's job. I don't know whose it would be, but like I think that he's been pretty good every time he's been called up. So I don't understand why he hasn't gotten more playing time to this day, because I always thought that he would, especially after the playoffs last year. But I think ideally he gets a roster spot next season.
Heather?
Yeah, I wonder if there's something else going on with him that maybe, at the minors that the coaching staff were just, they weren't seeing from him. I feel it just seems like there's something more there other than just, okay, he's not up here. Like, well, why? I don't know if they're not seeing something out of him, like, on the ice, work ethic wise. If they, I just feel like there had to be some reason why he wasn't up here, that maybe wasn't completely obvious if you're just looking at like stats and stuff. So I don't, I'm not sure what that is, but it just felt like a situation where he, he should be up here, he would be up here, but like it just feels like there's got to be some other reason why he wasn't. So I don't know if they were looking for more out of him than they were getting in Iowa. But it did seem rather strange, especially like you said with Dumba. I kind of said before, like in the playoffs like that, there's a difference between playing hurt and being a liability. And then even, I mean, for your long-term health, I mean, with the stuff that came out about his injuries, it was like, I don't know, was that the smartest thing to be playing? I mean, it did, there were some plays that he made that did affect the team too. So
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought on Addison is if he's too much like a tweener between Brodeen and Spurgeon, a little bigger than one, a little smaller than the other, but sort of an offensive defenseman, power play sort of specialist, he's got to have some trade value. If we can trade him for some size for a young guy like AKA another Middleton, I'm all about it. If he's not figuring in, if he wasn't one of your guys down that, so I would like to see what they can do about moving him. I know a lot of our game is transition from defense to offense, but I'm never against this team getting big on the blue line, which they rarely ever seem to be. He doesn't do that.
no.
I'm not going to spend too much time on Adam Beckman because he didn't spend any time with the team this year.
Mm-hmm.
So if he jumps up, he can do that. Okay. Are we all three of us? Does anybody really want to say anything about Jordy Ben other than thanks for the time?
Yeah, no, bye.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Jordy Ben, Jamie Ben, I could barely keep him straight. That's how much I didn't really notice him. So.
There's a big difference between the two of them, though. Jamie Ben,
Yeah,
is
good.
yeah, he's the better. He's the one you want. He's 34
Mhm.
years old. There's time to move on. Nick Bukestad.
I mean, I think he's a really good depth piece. So, on that fourth line, he was a healthy scratch a lot this season, it felt like. But and with Dewar and Duhaime and just like all the prospects that we have, I just with how tight the team is with salary cap, I don't know if it's going to be realistic to be able to keep him. But if they can make it work, he's a good depth piece to have.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it was disappointing to not see him get into the lineup for the playoffs. I thought that might be one of the kind of bigger adjustments is to have him step in there more in a bigger role in the fourth line. And he was out with that like really weird fluke injury for a while this year. He has the one of us from Blaine thing going on, so that's always fun. But yeah, I think that, it'd be fine to have him back, but I think it's, again, you're kind of looking at the cap and roster situation, like where's there space for him, and at 29, is he going to want to be around as kind of the guy that's might be in the press box a lot as the healthy scratch?
Good guy, oft injured, limited at this point in his career with his back, as to what he can really do. If Nick Bukestad is on this team next year, it means Dewar, Duhaime, and Goudreau didn't do enough. So,
Yeah.
Nick, thanks again. Appreciate it. Good luck. Nick Delorier.
No, I mean, okay, actually, I'm not quite sure about this one because his like toughness and just his size, all of that is great, but when like we saw in this postseason, he wasn't really helpful to this team because the Blues knew not to engage in his like fighting and just like what he was trying to do. So other than that, I'm not quite sure what value he has, but at the same time, the regular season, 82 games is a long time, and sometimes that toughness and grit really does help. So I'm not quite sure about this one because I see the pros and cons to keeping him, but again, I guess it just depends on price.
Yeah, this felt a little more like just kind of one of those moves you make at the deadline, a little bit like Fleury to me, sort of okay, we're going to bring him in there like for this year, for the playoff run. I didn't necessarily see him as a longer term piece here. And I think, yeah, in the playoffs, he wasn't super noticeable. It was interesting too, because what he came in here and talked about how he doesn't score goals and his, offense isn't the reason he's here. And then he scored, I think, his first or second game.
Yeah.
but other than that, yeah, I mean, it's the toughness factor. And, they were asked about that a lot early on too, because it was like, well, you have Foligno, X always kind of in the mix on some of that stuff too, Hartman. So it was sort of like, do they need another guy like that in a way? And, he could certainly be the odd man out. I know I talked to him when he first got here too. And I mean, he really was so complimentary of the organization and he really enjoyed being here. And I could tell that it was coming from a place of like, yeah, I've been around, I've been with a lot of teams, and this is, coming into this situation is so different. And, I think that was refreshing here. I think that's why he'd want to be back, but I'm just not sure. Again, there's kind of the room for him or if that was part of the long-term plan anyway.
I would love to have him. It's a nice when somebody does something to Kaprizov, and you don't want to lose Fiala or take a chance on Foligno and take a chance on him breaking a hand or something like that. He's a good insurance policy, but I go back to adding another big defenseman. Somebody, because Middleton can do this, or you bring in somebody else who's got a little bit more game than Delorier does, but he should not be with this team from a talent standpoint next year either. Are we pretty good with Dewar and Duhaime? These are both guys that should be contending for third and fourth line next year.
Yeah, 100%. Especially Dewar. I think I've maintained that he's better than Duhaime, so I never really quite understood why they favored Duhaime, but I think they both should be on the roster next year, and they both are going to be big pieces to that bottom six. So, and just them with their price and age and stuff is going to be really helpful because even what we saw with Dewar in the playoffs in that game when he did finally get the chance to crack the lineup, he looked really good.
Okay, just in the interest of time, I'm going to put you guys to some kind of almost rapid fire, and you just will tell me what you would do. Okay, so the next two guys just fall together alphabetically: Matt Dumba and Kevin Fiala. As you look at that situation right now, 15 seconds is all you have to answer this question. What do you do with Matt Dumba and Kevin Fiala?
I think trade Fiala, keep Dumba, and I think that's what the team's probably going to do, especially with what Bill Guerin has been saying on like KFan and just interviews recently. But Fiala, as much as he was an awesome wing last year, but just with the price, we can't afford him. And I do think that Dumba, with his leadership and when he's healthy, he's a really good defenseman. So I think he just brings more value to the team on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably what they're looking to do. It was interesting watching the playoffs because it was like, man, both of these guys aren't really making a case for themselves here at all. And of course you can point to Dumba being hurt. But yeah, I think they're, everyone can see Fiala's probably out the door and, they'll probably hang on to Dumba.
I will just go out there and say, given my druthers, and I don't sure we can afford them, I would keep Fiala and I would trade Dumba, and I'm not against trading both because I just think that Dumba is just he's like Eddie Rosario. There's no guarantee we won't see Matthew Dumba skating with the Stanley Cup next year because he's kind of a big moment guy, kind of like Eddie is, but he's going to make some plays that you're just scratch your head, just go, what in the world? So I'm done with that. Freddie Gaudreau, we think is good. They for whatever reason, they signed Alex Goligoski to a 2-year contract. I don't know what in the world that was about. Trusting Bill Guerin on that. Tyson Jost, they moved him up, but here's a guy who was a high draft choice at one point, and I don't know what he's really done, to warrant. I guess they must see a lot in practice. Are you expecting him to take a jump next year? Is he with this team? Tyson Jost?
Definitely, I think he's with this team, but I think just they probably, especially compared to Nico Sturm, who he was traded for, I think they see a lot more offense in him, and they probably see a lot more potential in him through practice, as you said. But it's possible that he jumps the depth chart, but a lot of it depends on what line Rossi slates in on, assuming he does make the roster.
And he's a center, which has been, kind of their issue a little bit too. And I can't remember which game it was. There was one of the playoff games he was really, really good. I think it must have been one of their wins because I remember
Yeah.
saying like he was their player of the game. He didn't have any points or score, but like he was their player of the game to me. So, I think they're always kind of looking at that center position too. And that's sort of a coveted thing. Like, can he make it there? And, because center is where they just haven't had the depth.
Hopefully next year, you said some guy stepping up to take that. Freddie Gaudreau, I thought great progress this year. Looking forward to see what he can do. Dmitry Kulikov, here or gone?
Those playoff games are still fresh in my mind.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I'm
What?
struggling with that one. The fact that he was horrible game one and contributed to some of those goals against was rightfully scratched going forward in the rest of the playoffs, and then
Comes back and does the same thing.
for Goligoski in game 6, and he did the exact same thing. So I don't know. I mean, he wasn't that kind of a liability during the regular season. He wasn't that noticeable, like, oh, here's Kulikov again, giving up goals like that, so I don't know what happened there. But that's still kind of fresh in my mind. So, I don't know, with Goligoski getting the deal too, I could still see him being around. I don't think, you look back on those couple of games of the playoffs and say, oh, he had a terrible season. I mean, I think he added some benefit to your blue line. I think it was just, it's hard to say right now because those two games are just too fresh.
They're too fresh. No, you're right. So Middleton, we want back. We don't know if we'll be able to afford him or not. But hoping that Middleton comes back. Merrill, the contract makes sense. 3 years at 1.2 per year. Can't get anybody cheaper than that. Rossi will be up next year, which gets us down to the goalies. One or the other, or both, or neither?
Well, I'll start with saying I know that Talbot is technically under contract, and just in his exit interview on Monday, he talked about how he was really professional about the whole situation, which was great. But he talked about how he expects to be here, and unless the Wild trade him or something else happens, that he will be in a Wild sweater next year. So I think that holds true. I think they do keep Talbot. They got to mend whatever happened there. Although Dean did respond and say that the whole "it's an easy decision" thing was meant to say that either of them would be an easy decision. I think he's just that I don't think that's actually true, that no one talks like that. But like I do think Talbot will be back. As for Fleury, I don't know, because again, money is just such a problem, and it just depends on all the other people that they do or don't resign. I don't think they need to make a big push to keep Fleury. Like, if the money works out and they get it to work, that's great. But I know there's other teams that are probably gonna want him back. Like, he's not gonna get a big deal, obviously, but there's probably a good chance the Wild can't match what some other team possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's what it might come down to with Fleury. Like, I'm sure, he likes being here. He wanted, he'd like to be back, but I think it could come down to, I'm sure there's other teams that are going to want, a Hall of Fame goalie to step in, because right now the Wild are looking at, hey, we have these two great goalies, and that's not the case elsewhere. So I think it could come down to, he's going to get better offers elsewhere. And I don't think that would stop him from, being like, oh, I got to be loyal to Minnesota. That's not happening. I definitely would see the scenario that Talbot's going to be here and they find, they make some other trade or some other move to find some backup, and he goes back to being the number one. My gut doesn't tell me that they're going to have both guys back next year.
I don't think so either. And I'd honestly be okay if neither was back. And I would go with two younger goalies, but maybe Talbot's there to be that mentor. The important signing happened with Wallstedt going to Iowa. To have the two of them in camp together and working together in that sense, I think would probably be a positive. I think Talbot would take that role. So if he's there to be the mentor, I'm okay with that. Tanishka, real quickly, we're up against it. How is your motorsports acumen?
Non-existent.
Okay, so I'd like to give this last minute or two to our friend Heather. Heather has got an appreciation for the Indy 500, so much so that she is traveling to the Indy 500 with her dad this weekend, which I think is super cool. I hope you guys have a wonderful experience and good weather, because weather is everything with the Indy 500 is concerned. Not telling you anything you don't know, but I want to push you out there once, Heather, and just throw some names out there for us. Who should we look for as potential winners of the Great American Road Race, or not road race? What is it? The Great American Race?
No, it's the Daytona 500.
That's the Daytona 500.
The greatest spectacle in racing.
Okay, I apologize.
Well, so qualifying is this weekend. So
okay.
I might have a better idea next week of just kind of where guys shake out. You know, for sure, like I'm looking at guys like Joseph Newgarden, who is with Team Penske. And, you know, he's been a series champion before, hasn't won the Indy 500. But it's always a safe bet to kind of go with one of the Penske cars for sure. They're always in the mix. You know, Marco Andretti is back again as kind of a one-off. He doesn't race full-time in the series anymore, but he's always kind of a sentimental favorite, kind of hoping that, you know, another Andretti could win, other than Mario won it once in 1969. So then there's, you know, kind of that Andretti curse people talk about. They haven't been able to win, but he's always run fairly well there. He won the pole a couple years ago. You know, he's always had good finishes, just hasn't been able to win. You know, there's a few former winners in the field. I'm still hoping Scott Dixon can win a second one. He won back in 2008, and he's won 6 series championships. He's still, you know, a very, very good racer. They call him the Iceman. He's just super cool under pressure. You know, I'd really like to see him get a second one, so I'll be keeping my eye on him for sure. I think it'll be interesting to take a look at Simone Pagenaud, who won a couple of years ago, or in 2019. He was with Team Penske, and he's with Meyer Shank now, the team that Helio Castroneves won with last year. So I think it'll be interesting to see what their team puts together this year. Been watching a little bit of practice this week as they've been running at Indy, and seeing some of the guys, you know, trying to find their speed. You know, there's always a few rookies, always a few like first time, you know, guys in the race. So we'll see. Colton Herta is probably the other one. He just won the road course race at Indy this past weekend. So there's a road course like on the inside, and they race on the front stretch on going the other direction. So he won that race this past weekend, and he's had a lot of success for being so young. I think he won a couple of years ago as the youngest winner of an IndyCar race ever, and he has been really, really fun to watch for being such a young guy. So I guess those are a few names we'll throw out, but yeah, should be fun next weekend.
But you're going this weekend, but just watch qualifying.
No, we're going to the race next weekend.
How did I get this all wrong? I thought our conversation that you were going, I'm like, oh, we'll get this prediction beforehand. So it's still Memorial Day weekend, and you're going actually that weekend, which makes perfect sense. So other than the fact that I got Indy 500 right, I got everything else wrong in that segment. So good on me. All right, you guys, we'll call it a session on that one. Thank you both for your time and your contributions. You guys are the best. Thank you for checking it out. It's Let's Play every day. Have a great weekend, everybody. Be good to each other.